Great powers seem to emerge from the mists of history as if destined for greatness. They rise with astonishing speed, their influence stretching across continents and oceans. For a time, their dominance appears absolute, their culture, economy, and military might shaping the known world. Then, just as surely as they rose, they begin to falter. The foundations crack. The edifice of power groans under its own weight. This is a story as old as civilization itself, a recurring drama played out on the grand stage of world history. We have seen this cycle repeat many times, but three examples stand out for their scale and their lessons: the Roman Empire, the British Empire, the United States. Each reached the zenith of global influence, and each faced profound challenges that tested its endurance. This examination will follow a clear and deliberate arc, which I call the Then, Now, Next framework. First, under the heading of Then, we will explore how these great powers rose to prominence. The story of Rome begins not as an empire, but as a small, unassuming city-state on the Italian peninsula. Its rise was not preordained. It was the product of relentless ambition. Military innovation a genius for practical organization. Rome's early expansion was driven by its legions, a fighting force unparalleled in its time for disciplined training, engineering prowess. Roman soldiers were not just warriors, they were builders. Wherever they marched, they constructed fortified camps, durable roads, bridges, laying down the physical infrastructure of an empire. This ability to project force and then solidify control through engineering was a cornerstone of their success. The legions could move faster and more reliably than their enemies, enabling Rome to respond to threats and consolidate gains with remarkable efficiency. Beyond its military might, Rome's ascent was powered by a revolution in governance and infrastructure that made its dominion attractive, or at least tolerable, to many conquered peoples. Centuries after Rome's fall, a new kind of empire arose from a small island nation in the North Atlantic. Great Britain's ascent to global dominance was not based on overwhelming land armies, but on mastery of the seas and the revolutionary power of industry. The journey began with a focus on maritime trade and naval strength. Britain, as an island, was naturally oriented toward the ocean. It built a formidable royal navy that protected its merchant shipping defeated rival fleets and secured a string of strategic ports and colonies around the globe. These outposts, from Gibraltar to Singapore, functioned as coaling stations, naval bases, commercial hubs, forming a global network that became the backbone of its empire. The Navy ensured that Britannia literally ruled the waves. The true catalyst for Britain's global supremacy, however, was the Industrial Revolution. Beginning in the late 18th century, a wave of technological innovation swept through the nation. New machines powered by steam transformed the production of textiles. The rise of the United States to superpower status was exceptionally rapid, occurring largely within the 20th century. Its foundations were laid in a vast, resource-rich continent insulated by two great oceans from the perennial conflicts of Europe and Asia. For much of its early history, America focused on westward expansion and industrial development, powered by a dynamic immigrant workforce and a culture of innovation. By the early 1900s, the United States had already become the world's largest economy, with massive industrial output in steel oil manufacturing. However, it was the crucible of two world wars that transformed this economic giant into a global political and military leader. America became, in President Franklin D. Roosevelt's words, the arsenal of democracy, supplying the Allied powers with the material to win the war. The same military commitments and territorial expanse that define a superpower's greatness eventually become the source of its most intractable problems. A great power must spend enormous sums to defend its borders, police its trade routes, garrison its far-flung outposts. Over time, these costs tend to rise, while the economic base that supports them may begin to erode. This phenomenon, which can be called imperial or economic overstretch, is a central chapter in the story of decline. Rome, for instance, found itself burdened by the immense cost of maintaining a massive army along its vast frontiers, Hadrian's Wall in Britain, deserts of Syria. As threats multiplied, more soldiers and more expensive fortifications were needed, straining the imperial treasury to its breaking point. They repeatedly debased the currency, reducing the amount of precious metal in their coins, which led to runaway inflation. As the value of money plummeted, confidence in the economy withered. At the same time, taxes on agriculture and trade grew ever more oppressive, crushing the small farmers and merchants who formed the backbone of the economy. Great Britain faced a similar reckoning in the 20th century. The colossal expense of fighting 2 world wars left the nation exhausted and deeply in debt, much of it owed to the United States. Today, the United States exhibits clear symptoms of economic overstretch. It maintains the most expensive military in the world, with hundreds of bases and deployments across the globe. While economic pressures mount, a second, more insidious process of decay often takes hold within the superpower itself: the erosion of social cohesion and political effectiveness. In the late Roman Empire, the political system descended into chronic instability. The succession of emperors became a violent and chaotic affair, with generals frequently marching on Rome to seize power. A tiny, fantastically wealthy elite indulged in luxury. The masses in the cities became dependent on state-provided bread. Circuses, civic spirit, and the willingness to sacrifice for the common good withered away. In Britain, the decay was less about civil war and more about a crisis of confidence and purpose. Reports of colonial violence and the sheer cost of empire led many Britons to question whether it was all worth it. In the contemporary United States, similar signs of internal decay are deeply concerning. Trust in key institutions, government, the press, the electoral process, has fallen to historic lows. This political dysfunction is compounded by soaring economic inequality. A society divided against itself cannot make the difficult, long-term investments needed for renewal. As a superpower grapples with economic overstretch and internal decay, invariably, new challengers emerge, eager to contest the dominant power's position. The most significant is the rise of China, a nation that has experienced several decades of astonishing economic growth. These include climate change, the rapid spread of pandemics like COVID-19, the vulnerability of global supply chains, and the pervasive threat of cyber attacks that can cripple critical infrastructure. These new dangers require international cooperation. A superpower's military might is often ill-suited to combat these diffuse threats, forcing it to adapt or risk being overwhelmed by problems its traditional tools of power cannot solve. When we step back, view these 3 historical arcs: Rome, Britain, the United States. The anatomy of decline reveals a remarkably consistent blueprint. It is not a single event, but a process and interplay of interconnected forces. The process begins when the costs of maintaining power, military expenses, administrative expenses, start to outpace the economic capacity of the state. This is the moment of overstretch. The superpower finds itself running faster and faster, spending its wealth on defense, spending its wealth on consumption instead of productive investments. History is a guide, not a jailer. The patterns of the past provide stark warnings, but they do not dictate an inescapable fate. The first principle is to strategically manage commitments. A nation cannot be everywhere and do everything. It must distinguish between vital interests and peripheral ones. Learn to say no. Share the burden of global security with allies. Rely more on diplomacy and economic statecraft. Avoid costly, open-ended military interventions that drain blood and treasure. Do fewer things well, not many things badly. Second principle: invest aggressively in domestic sources of power. National strength is built from the ground up. Invest in education. Invest in scientific research and development. Invest in modern infrastructure. Shift resources from consumption and overseas commitments to long-term renewal. Third, repair the nation's social and political fabric. Leaders must build bridges and seek compromise. Reform, strengthen voting rights. Reform, reduce the influence of money in politics. Reform, increase transparency. Adapt how we understand power. Strength isn't just aircraft carriers. It's the ability to lead coalitions to solve shared problems, confront climate change, prevent future pandemics, establish norms for cyberspace. No single nation can solve these alone. Lead in these areas to build alliances, generate goodwill, demonstrate value beyond military force, move from hegemon to respected leader. These are generational efforts, not quick fixes. The choice is clear. America can manage its decline or engineer its renewal. History waits for no one. The past illuminates the choices that lie before us, you know. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe for more.